The Mandela effect by now. This phenomenon started in the year 2013 when the former president of South Africa passed away on December 5th of 2013. When the world was mourning his death, thousands of people around the world had a vivid memory of him passing away in prison during the 80s. This became known as the Mandela effect. However, the term actually came up in 2010 when a woman named Fiona Broome realized Nelson Mandela was still alive. Her and many others even remembered the ceremonies on the news, the widow's speech. After Nelson Mandela's passing, mainstream media picked it up and called it collective false memories. But are these truly false memories? Or is this evidence of multiple timelines and parallel universes? In this series, we're going to look at some popular Mandela effects. But we're also going to explore the idea of collapsed timelines, the possible time wars, yes, time wars, that are occurring in the future to manipulate our present timeline. We're going to look at what CERN might possibly have to do with this. And if these are truly false memories, then why is there only two options? If it was false memories, don't you think there'd be hundreds of different ways that people remembered things? But it's always two distinct things that are very close. Now, the Mandela effect became really popular when people began to notice that the popular children's book that most of us read as children was the Berenstain Bears, not the Berenstein Bears. And wait, didn't the Monopoly Man have a monocle? Why doesn't he have one now? I could have sworn it was the Flintstones, not the Flintstones. Do you remember Looney Tunes or Looney Tunes? Was it Oscar Mayer with an E or Oscar Mayer with an A? I could have swore that Fruit of the Loom had a cornucopia, but I guess it didn't. I could have swore that Tweedledee and Tweedledum had a little propeller on their hat, not a green flag. And was Cruella de Vil always spelled de Vil? Was it Cocoa Puffs or Cocoa Puffs? Many people remember the Mona Lisa looking like this, although today she's smiling. These little Debbie cakes, there's no line dividing them, but many people remember a small line that you could break it into two. I could have sworn Curious George had a tail, but he doesn't anymore. We all remember Mirror, Mirror on the Wall, who's the fairest of them all. But apparently she said magic mirror on the wall. The famous quote, Luke, I am your father, never exactly happened. It was just, I am your father. Another famous quote, hello, Clarice, from Silence of the Lambs, isn't in the movie. He just says good morning. Now this one hits close to home. The famous line, Lucy, you got some splaining to do, never happened. Stay tuned, because we're going to talk about collapsed timelines and possible reasons that could happen. In this part, I'm going to show you the footage of a government employee explaining the Mandela effect. But first, cosmic brownies. So a lot of people in the comments are saying that there's two sizes available. So both of these exist. And personally, I haven't seen one of these since I was a little Debbie. So thank you to the people who put their own health at risk to eat these things. I'm sorry. I truly love you guys. Randy Kramer. This is a clip from the Gaia show called Cosmic Disclosure, where they interview former secret space program employees about their secret projects. Randy Kramer has a wild and incredible story. And in the upcoming Alien series, we are going to get into that. He does still currently work for the GOV and is currently a part of a disclosure program. But let's take a look at his explanation of the Mandela effect.
And in order for it not to cease to exist, that timeline then merges with another timeline. So it doesn't cease to exist, it joins another timeline, and then that has to merge and go forward. And in order for it not to cease to exist, that timeline then merges with another timeline.
Okay, so what causes a timeline to collapse?
Timeline collapsing is a result of some of the other experiments that are being done in opening up, in some cases, very large portals, multidimensional portals, big enough that you could, fly a ship through. And some of those have incurred, let's just say, temporal accidents.
We're going to get more into this in the next part, but here's one possible example of a temporal accident. This event happened on September 10th of 2008. But NASA just wanted to clarify, the world didn't end. Here's what didn't happen. No, there was not the creation of a microscopic black hole.
Things were completely different on one timeline to another, and now they've come together. And so you have people who just remember things completely differently because they were on a different timeline.
But if CERN collapsed an entire timeline, I'm sure they'd admit to it, right? I mean, they did sing and dance to the song Happy. He's holding 3 signs. One that says Mandela, one that says Bond number 1, and one that says We are happy at CERN. Mandela? But what's Bond number 1? Well, who was the first James Bond? Barry Nelson. Nelson Mandela. The Mandela effect. And what the hell does that sign say? Is that for the other timeline? What's their effect called? More about CERN and this man coming up.
Got time to kill, I got time to feel. I took a red pill. I know life's short, so I wanna live real, but how's it supposed to feel? How's it supposed to feel? How's it supposed to feel?
Right where we left off, that cheesy yet creepy CERN video. Who exactly is this guy? Physicist John Ellis.
Here's my favorite theory. I'm going to have to say string theory.
So what exactly is string theory? So take a look at any object around you. I'm going to use this really awesome book that I just got. So of course, a book is made of a cover and pages, but on a much smaller level, it's made of molecules, like everything around us. And those molecules are made of atoms. And it's important we go over this because this creepy portal-looking thing at CERN, the LHC, the Large Hadron Collider, is a giant atom smasher. Now back to string theory. We have molecules. When you look deeper into molecules, you have atoms. When you look deeper into an atom, you have a nucleus. When you go deeper, you have neurons and protons. When you go deeper, you have quarks. And now here's where string theory comes in. Theoretical physicists theorize that when you go deeper, everything is just a little string that's vibrating, and that none of these things are really particles at all. They're just a bunch of vibrating strings. Everything around us is just a collection of vibrating strings. And this is why some people call this the theory of everything. Now, if you guys go back to my Earthshift series, Marina Jacobi channeled this from aliens in the future. Yes, I said aliens from the future. And these aliens say that the quantum structure is these little waves of frequency, which just so happen to look like little vibrating strings. When 3 of them match, they create a trinity. When 3 more match, they create another trinity. And when these 3 trinities meet, they begin to create a reality. 3, 6, 9. And here's a quote from Nikola Tesla. If you only knew the magnificence of 3, 6, and 9, then you would have the key to the universe. Now, of course, Marina Jacobi's work is not recognized by quantum physicists. However, it doesn't sound so far off. If everything is just vibrating little strings, and these strings come together to form particles, now let's take a look at one of the most famous studies in quantum theory. That by simply watching something, as the observer, you are affecting the reality. And I know this is boring, but we have to know this in order to understand the Mandela effect and to deal with the naysayers who think they have such good memories. Like, no, reality is not even fucking real, dude. Like, come on. And we need to know this because if everything in the universe is made of these strings, what could happen if a bunch of people are just smashing them? Only appear to be particles because they're being observed, then what the fuck are they really smashing? Guys, we're coming in hot with this next part. I needed you to understand what the theoretical physicists are saying so we can get to my expertise as a theoretical conspiracist. And it's important you know those things because when you go back to the Earthshift series, this is more proof that you shape your reality, that you can create new timelines, and that you can manifest the world that you want to live in. Now, if time is simultaneous, and the future is technically now, and you go back to the concept of our entire reality and universe being a hologram, then a bunch of vibrating strings taking the form of things that appear to be matter, simply because we're observing them, then maybe all of the realities and all of the dimensions are using those exact same strings, but they're appearing different to each thing that's observing them. Oh, and the reason that string theory is really important, it originated at CERN. And you know me, I'm gonna bring it back to Dolores Cannon. The Convoluted Universe, Book 1. The chapter's called Parallel Universes. They're never absolutely identical. There's always at least one thing different, and that one thing is enough to make another universe. And it can be as small as a grain of sand being positioned differently on a beach, which explains why a lot of the Mandela effects are extremely close. Either it's an E or an A. And what makes it more complex is that there is always new universes being created. For every action, there's more than one possible outcome. In your universe, one outcome is realized, but all the energy of the other outcomes have to go somewhere. And so these different outcomes that were not realized in your universe cause another universe that is practically identical. It gives the example that your nose itches. You can rub your nose, you can scratch your nose, or you can sneeze. If you sneeze, that's the universe that becomes realized and perceived by you. But the energy of the two other outcomes, two other universes come into being. Now, of course, this is confusing. How is everything happening at once? But it says that happening implies a beginning and an end, and we have to look at it as existing, because existing is undefined. So if each individual person is able to constantly create new timelines and parallel universes, what could cause thousands or millions of people to shift into a parallel reality at the same time? Now, you might remember this from my Earthshift series. The same aliens that gave Marina Jacobi that information gave Barbara Marciniak this information. Timelines, the fabric of time, and the tubes that run through these fabrics of time are all hooked into primary events. Without primary events, you cannot hook into a timeline. The splitting of the atom was a primary event. The invention of the internet was also a primary event. And guess where the internet originated? CERN. That's right, www. Which you might remember this from my Apocalyptic Prophecy series. The Hebrew alphabet is represented by numbers. So www in Hebrew means 666. And coincidentally, CERN's logo is also 666. But what does this all mean? Today we're going to discuss the possibility that there might be a division of the government that handles timelines. And could that have been the inspiration for the Christopher Nolan movie Tenet? So if you saw this film, there's a good chance that you didn't get it. The only reason that I was able to follow along is because I watched this episode of Cosmic Disclosure about Time Wars.
Time Corp, they regulate all time travel.
Who's in control of the Time Corps, though?
Time Corp is in control
That's
of
their,
Time Corp.
yeah, and who's in control of them?
They are associated with the military, but they don't answer to the military. nor do they answer to any political or ruling bodies. They actually are operated under mandates to protect the time-space stream and will do whatever they deem is necessary or required to keep the time stream clear.
So the last time I posted about Randy Kramer, some people got super pissed. And look, I'm not saying that everyone that I reference is a perfect person. I'm not saying he's a perfect person. I'm not saying Dolores Cannon is a perfect person. I'm not a perfect person. You're not a perfect person. So I'll summarize some more of what he says in this episode, which this is season 10. The episode is called Time Wars. So he claims that Time Corp is stationed in the future, that if you go to the location of their headquarters, you would not see their headquarters there because they're stationed in the future. And their headquarters is basically in a temporal bubble, a time bubble. And that basically they know they did their job if they look out the window and there's a world left. That some days they look out and it's just devastation. And other days they look out and the world is thriving. And that basically they're calculating algorithms. The smartest people on earth are calculating these algorithms so that when something happens to our timeline, they're able to pinpoint what happened, travel to that moment, and make adjustments. Now, the biggest issue for them is time traveling species from the future. And if you remember this book by Barbara Marciniak, which also said that there's beings that are manipulating our timeline in a way that we believe our human history is different because we only perceive that things could have came from the past and that the future hasn't occurred yet. So when certain beings change things in the future, we think some of these artifacts are from the past, but some of them are from the future. And in this movie, very similar to what Randy Kramer is saying, divisions of the government that are stationed in the future are using algorithms and weaponizing these algorithms to make changes in our present. And the reason why his future self and present self couldn't meet, they could rip a hole in time or create realities that they never existed. Hey guys, welcome back. We're going to explore another possibility that caused the Mandela effect. But first, let's recap the possible ways this could have happened. One possibility, an accident at CERN, may have caused a timeline to collapse, creating a microscopic black hole that sucked an entire collective reality into it, forcing anyone on that timeline to merge into the closest possible timeline. Two, a time-traveling species of aliens manipulated our timeline to change a future outcome, whether that be for our highest good or for their personal gain. We're going to get more into the different species in the AD series, but some that are known for time traveling are the Zeta Reticuli Greys and Draconians. The third possibility, that Time Corp, a division of the government stationed in the future, which corrects timelines, could have adjusted our timelines that could have been messed up, either by another species, either by time travelers in the future coming back and messing with our timelines. And now I'm going to present to you another possibility. And for copyright reasons, I'm going to read this part to you. This information is coming from Cosmic Disclosure on Gaia TV. And we also have to deal with the effect of failed timelines, which is a naturally occurring physical effect in the universe. We have a time strain in the middle of everything that is stable and successful for the evolution of the universe. And once other strains or lines are explored due to the free will of individuals, then there are many fading timelines. When someone moves into an unstable timeline, unstable meaning that if you were to follow that timeline all the way through, it would not be the highest timeline of the universe. And these timelines can fail for a lot of reasons, including self-destructive behavior, random occurring events or incidents, or just because the consciousness unit decides that it wants to go back to a different place and no longer experience that timeline. And the one that they were just exploring would then become a failed timeline. All of those failed timelines are reintegrated back into the successful main timeline. So that was Tim from Cosmic Disclosure. He works for the German government and worked with a program that was dealing with Zeta Reticuli Greys. And he's explaining that this is actually a natural process in the universe. There's one main successful timeline of evolution, and that if any being or species travels off of it, they can explore that. But once that timeline starts to fail meaning not towards the evolution of the universe, then anyone on those failed timelines will be reintegrated back into the main timeline. He also says that you wouldn't really notice this happening because it's a natural process of the universe. So it makes you wonder that even if there was an accident, we would be reintegrated back into the successful timeline. So everyone's saying they miss the old timeline or that believe we're somehow on a worse timeline. Even though this timeline seems a lot less fun, even though we lost all the good catchphrases, we're probably on the successful timeline.
I've got visions in my head, like memories after death, to be a legend instead of something you can forget. I'm living up every breath, I'd rather lead than be led. I'll fill the seats as I spread with every word that I've said.
Hey guys, welcome back. I'm so exhausted, I was gonna go to bed, but I saw this really cool stuff, so.
Berenstein timeline is in the 17th dimension.
Maybe later, sis. I'm really into this book, Flash Grizzly in the 17th dimension. 17th dimension? You've heard of the third dimension and the fourth dimension. Well, the 17th dimension is so far out that you can't reach it even if you go at the speed of light. Well, thrill.
What? Okay, so personally, I think it's probably edited, but that was pretty cool. Looking through an old Palm Pilot.
This doorway, what happens? And it's fucking weird. It happens when it gets in the room. See it? And then back out here, normal. Yeah. What the fuck? Uh-huh. Yeah. And then normal. This just creeps me out, man. I don't even like to be in this room anymore. When I sleep in here.
I think it's interesting that the book is called On Time. My personal opinion is that this is also edited, although very fun to watch.
The Berenstein Bears!
So it says Berenstain, but it sounded like he said Berenstein, didn't it?
You like me right now. You like me.
Okay, I did fall asleep. But this famous quote, "You like me, you really like me," is now, "Right now you like me." What's interesting is that her brother, Rick Field, works at CERN on the Large Hadron Collider. And according to them, when their mother, Margaret Field, was in the movie The Man from Planet X in 1951, that this story inspired both children. It inspired Sally to become an actress like her mom, and it inspired Rick to work at CERN.
You love me. You really love me.
So as you saw, Jim Carrey was remembering it the old way. Now in Silence of the Lambs, Hannibal Lecter doesn't say, "Hello, Clarice." But once again, Jim Carrey quoting in a movie something that is now no longer in existence. Interesting because he's in a movie about erasing memories, how his life isn't real, just a TV show, a movie about synchronicities and their deeper meaning. It makes you wonder if his entire career is teaching humanity the truth about our reality. Hi guys, welcome back. Now I want to explore what is the purpose of the Mandela effect. So let's look at a very brief history about the impact of Nelson Mandela on the world. Nelson Mandela is considered one of the ultimate figures of peace in modern history. South Africa was extremely racially divided. Even though 70 or more % of the population was Black, it was being controlled by a small percentage of white people. South Africa was extremely segregated. Black Africans were not allowed to vote, not allowed to run for office, didn't have access to education, and the land was getting torn up by diamond mining, which of course only the white population was profiting from. And this in the 40s, 50s, and 60s was when Nelson Mandela started to come into power through an organization called the ANC, which they initially started with peaceful protesting. But when the government retaliated with violence, the ANC also became destructive, which led to a young Nelson Mandela being imprisoned for 27 years. Now, this is a really interesting YouTube page. It's called What If Alt History. And this person plays out different things in history if they went differently. So he explores what would have happened if Nelson Mandela actually died in the 80s. And it's really interesting what he explores, but the biggest thing is that South Africa would have probably went into a civil war and divided into two separate countries. But in this current timeline, Nelson Mandela survived prison and came out to be the first democratically elected president of South Africa. He was the first Black president, but the first actual Democratic president in the first election they ever did. And the reason he's such a figure of peace, is because when he became president and had the power to make changes, he didn't retaliate, he didn't act out of revenge. He acted out of compassion and tried to unite the two groups, which he did successfully. And you could see in their flag here that he united the colors of the country's Black population and the red, white, and blue of the white population into a all-encompassing flag. Now, in this famous interview with Oprah, she asks, how could you go through the torture and imprisonment for 27 years and not have a cold heart and not be bitter? How do you come out of that experience with love and compassion and unite people?
On earth, you must try and use that period for the purpose of transforming your country into what you desire it to be. And therefore, you had to reject all negative features in your own soul, in your blood system, and focus your attention on the positive thing.
And how one person can be a catalyst for change. In this part, we're going to explore a little bit more about the purpose of the Mandela effect. So we just went over the impact that Nelson Mandela made on the world. How one person can be a catalyst for change. How he united a divided country. And how his message to the world was to use your time on Earth to change the world around you. How you change the world around you from within yourself. And in the previous parts of this series, how the universe naturally corrects itself off of failed timeline. And when a timeline fails, it will then merge into a successful timeline. So it does make sense that a extremely impactful person that changed the world, dying in prison under the control of their oppressors, could have possibly been a failed timeline. But my question is, why do some of us remember the other reality? What's the purpose of that? Now, this is my theory as to why some of us remember the other timeline. And if you've already watched my Earth Shift series, you know how I feel. I feel that a small group of people could change a collective timeline of the planet and shift the planet into a higher dimension simply by our thoughts, words, emotions, and actions, be able to manipulate this matrix that we are currently living in to shift humanity into a higher timeline. If you're lost, watch all 25 parts of the Earth Shift series. But I know most of you have seen it already. So I think the purpose of us even remembering the Mandela effect is to have the proof of timelines in a way that people understand. When we talk about splitting timelines and parallel realities, it's confusing. But when someone knows in their heart that there was a damn cornucopia on the Fruit of the Loom logo, it makes multiple timelines and alternate realities, it makes it easier to understand. And it teaches a collective of people, of course, not everybody, not everyone's going to shift the timeline of the planet. So who cares if they get it? But if you're one of the people who see this timeline shift, then you might be one of the people, one of the 3 waves of volunteers that I talked about in the Earth Shift series. Maybe you're one of those people who's meant to shift the timeline of the planet. And you need to understand how fluid the timelines are, how time is not solid, how the past is not solid. Like, yeah, so we can change the future, but also the past has changed. So this is your sign to start creating the future that you want to see. If one man, Nelson Mandela, could change an entire country, then go back to the 144,000 video I did, because less than 1% of the population can change an entire planet.